Welcome to the European Dark Ages. Mr. H here with you. And here we are. It's Europe around 500 AD, 25 years after the collapse of the Roman Empire. Not a lot has changed in 25 years. Ostrogoths are still running Italy, Visigoths in mostly Spain, Kingdom of the Franks, call that France, land of the Angles, England up there. And down here, of course, we've got the Vandals with the capital in the city that won't die, Carthage, and our friends over here in the Byzantine Empire. Already talked about the Byzantine reconquest of the West. Going to take Italy, destroy the Ostrogoths, took out the Vandals, took a bite out of the Visigoths, and they have trouble hanging on to the whole thing. But Europe is starting to pull itself together. It's not very easy because they're in a pretty bad place in 500 AD. There is no trade. These borders you're looking at, Kingdom of the Franks, it's not really what you would consider a stable country. Like I said before, it's more of a geographic suggestion. There's no trade. Nobody speaks to each other. We're not even sure who the king is half the time. And when there was a Roman Empire, it was almost like the old Amish thing. I need help building a barn, so everybody shows up to help, and if you need help harvesting the crops, I show up and help you for that in exchange. By 476, 500, that just doesn't happen anymore. Everything has broken down. Civilization is broken down. Trade is broken down. Everything has broken down. It really sucks to live in Europe in 500 AD. Let's talk about the Pope in Rome, guy with the funny hat. Now, the first pope, Mr. Pugh will tell you, over in the Religious Studies Department, is Peter, right there in the Gospel of Matthew 6:18. Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build this church. Don't have to know that for the exam, just thought you wanted to know that. The Catholic Church has been around. It's started getting organized kind of as the church we recognize in the 300s, thanks to, Constantine, the Edict of Milan. And they've been popes all the way to Peter, but the first, quote unquote, real pope, the first Pontiff Maximus, is Pope Leo I. That name look familiar? Now that's the guy who convinced Attila not to burn down Rome. So Pope Leo I is the first, organized pope of the organized church, first guy with the cross and the scepter and everything. I'm pretty sure he didn't have a microphone. But this is when the Catholic Church starts turning into what looks like a Catholic Church. And a lot of people in the Catholic Church think they can unite all of Europe under the banner of the Church. We'll see how that goes. Now, year 800, Merry Christmas, December 25, 800. Pope Leo III, not the first, this is another guy. He's got a little problem in Italy. The Byzantines own Italy after the Reconquista, but they're having trouble hanging on to it. And we have a Germanic tribe called the Lombards up and over the Alps are demolishing northern Italy, and they reach down into what they call the Papal States. That's the land the Pope owns. And the Byzantines are supposed to protect them. They don't really have a lot of forces available. They're just not getting the job done. So Leo looks for the biggest guy in the neighborhood. And quite literally, the biggest guy in the neighborhood is going to be Charlemagne, king of the Franks. Very big dude. And Charlemagne chases them out. Chases out the Lombards, and Pope Leo is so happy, and invites him to Rome for Christmas in 800, and crowns Charlemagne, king of the Franks, as the Holy Roman Emperor. What does that mean exactly? No one's really sure. Because as you can tell, Charlemagne is not Roman. He doesn't speak Latin. He's a Frank. And, declaring him to be the emperor in the West is an affront to the Byzantines, and believe me, they are not happy to hear this. There's an angry Byzantine emperor screaming, I am king of the Romans, I am king of the Greeks and emperor of the Romans in Greek. And, they're not very happy. There's another division there between the Byzantine East and the Catholic West. Again, this is part of the scheme Leo III has about turning the Holy Roman Empire into something all of Europe can unite behind. It's sort of a European Union 1.0. And like the European Union, doesn't look like it's going to work out too well. Now, who are these people, the Franks? They've been around a while, Germanic tribe. First actual sort of king of the Franks we can identify is a guy named Clovis. I think he was born in 466. We know he died in 511. Defeated the Burgundians and the Visigoths in France right after the Roman collapse. Clovis is part of the Merovingian family, and he's the guy who gets the credit for starting feudalism. And what's feudalism all about? Well, Clovis has his small army, and there's, I don't know, 10, 12 farmers, and he gets these 10, 12 farmers declare their loyalty to him. He is going to defend the farms with his army, keep the barbarians away, and if I need you, you show up and make my army a little bit bigger. Sounds like the hoplite thing all over again. And guess what? We have started something that looks sort of like a nation, because if he's defending these 10, 12 farms, they can trade with each other because the trade routes are now safe. You can leave your farm, come back, it doesn't get burned down most of the time. But you've got a chance. It's starting. So feudalism provides some much needed organization in what will be France. So feudalism, you get this land, you farm it, you give me 10%, and your loyalty, I defend it. If I need you, call you, show up with your pitchfork, join my army. That's feudalism in a nutshell. As a result, the Kingdom of the Franks, call it France, is now a semi-stable country. We've got trade, a little bit, got some roads, sort of a government, kinda. It's working on it. The king sometimes has trouble over the dukes and barons and the nobility. These are people who own even more land. So we've got the small farmers who pledge their loyalty to dukes and the dukes and barons pledge their loyalty to the king. Think of it as a pyramid. King on top, dukes and barons and nobility in the middle, all the farmers there on the bottom. Sometimes you can have some trouble with dukes and nobles. Sometimes the dukes and nobles can ignore the king. They have their own army. Sometimes they try to overthrow the king. Think they can do a better job. And then when they get to become the king, turns out they owe so many favors, everybody can't do anything. Quite often, you're better off being a Duke of Aquitaine rather than a King of France. Well, the French kings create an office called the Mayor of the Palace. He's supposed to take care of things while the king does king stuff. So the Mayor of the Palace is the XO, the second guy in charge. Starting to develop a form of government. It's not very sophisticated, but you got to start somewhere. All right, the Carolingian family. Somewhere along the line, the Merovingians just sort of either disappear or they married into the Carolingian family. We're not sure because, it's the Dark Ages. When the only records you have are in a monastery and the monastery gets burned down, you're going to have gaps in the record, and that's exactly what we end up with. Well, we have Pippin I, who died in 639. He was a mayor of the palace. So we have a Merovingian king and a Carolingian mayor of the palace. Well, the Carolingian family apparently is inheriting mayor of the palace one after another because Charles Martel, the Hammer, remember the guy who defeated the Muslims at Tours? He's a mayor of the palace in 732. Take care of business, defeat the Muslims, tell the king, hey, threat's done. That king at the time was a guy named Theodoric IV. He died, and Charles Martel was the acting king for 10 years. I don't know why he took the title acting king. But there it is. For 10 years, he is the acting king of the Franks. He dies, and here comes his son, Pepin II. By the way, does that name Pepin look familiar, Lord of the Rings fans? Yeah, Pepin le Tuc. There he is. Tolkien stole that one too, but hey, that's okay. I like Tolkien. Charles the Hammer, temporary king of the Franks for 10 years. Here comes his son, Pepin the Short. 751, he is the temporary king of the Franks, and he's mayor of the palace. So he says, I'm just taking the crown. I'm doing a job, I'm going to get the title. So there we are. Carolingian family, now king of the Franks. 751 to 768. Pepin II dies. Here comes his son, Charlemagne. 768 to 814. He's around for a very long time. You know about him being crowned the Holy Roman Emperor as well. King of the Franks and Holy Roman Emperor, 768 to 814. Look at this. No gaps, right? Third generation, no gaps. We got a stable country developing here. So, I also got lucky, too, because under Germanic law, you're supposed to divide your kingdom among all the sons. Yeah, Pepin was an only son. Charlemagne was an only son. So far, so good. They're not splitting the kingdom up. So Charlemagne is there for a very long time, 768 to 814. He builds the kingdom of the Franks, France, into an actual stable country. He takes his Holy Roman Emperor stuff pretty seriously too. Look at the size of the Frankish Empire. Smashing up the Saxons who are still up in Germany. Saxons in England stay in England. Fighting over here Bulgarians and some other Slavs and some other Germans. We know about the Lombards. Pope of Rome's his buddy. Down here to fight the Muslims again, up here in northern Spain, up and over the Pyrenees. So Frankish Empire is the first stable country we have seen in Western Europe in 400 years. Over here is the Byzantine Empire. They're not too happy about some guy claiming to be the Western Emperor. They didn't go to war over this thing. Even if they did, how are they supposed to fight each other? That's not, it's just not going to work out. Can't get close enough to fight each other, right? And you can see how much of Italy the Byzantines are hanging on to, stable fashion. They're losing the grip on Italy, which is, why Pope Leo III ran to the Franks in the first place. All right, so Charlemagne dies in 814. We got Louis the Pious. Look at this. Got a fourth generation now. We got a stable country. It's pretty big. We've got stable leadership. And Louis the Pious got lucky because he was an only son. He had a brother named Pepin. They love that name, Pepin. And, he was insane. They tossed him in a solitary confinement. He just sort of disappeared. So Louis the Pious is running the show from 814 to 843. The family's been running this place for almost a century now. Well, he has 3 sons, and so, under Germanic law, he wants to divide the empire 3 ways. Oh, bad idea, bad idea. I know you're thinking, why don't you make the oldest son the king, the second son we could revive mayor of the palace, and the other guy put him in charge of the army or something. That's what I would have done, but, Louis the Pious decided no. And what looks like a united Europe on the surface at any rate gets divided 3 ways. We got the East, the West, and the Central Realm. Look at this. Looks like France. Looks like Germany. They called us Australia, but, don't worry about that. This is the stuff they are going to fight over, France and Germany, for the next 1,000 years. Don't worry about this. I just saved you $100. So Europe is crawling slowly but surely towards the light, trying to crawl out of the Dark Ages. The Kingdom of France, the Kingdom of Germania, Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Oh, we're using that word kingdom a lot. So finally, Europe is starting to look somewhat stable. And of course, every time they look like they're about to crawl up to the mountainside, up the ground goes out beneath them and they start crashing back towards the bottom. Problems with pirates, Magyars, and something even worse to the north. Magyars, Muslims, Vikings. You guys know about the out-of-control pirates, is how I talk. Someone wrote that in an essay once. You remember they had their navy, originally Umayyad Navy, and they kind of lost control of it, and now everybody's trying to hunt them down, and they've really gotten out of control. They're raiding all of southern Europe. They raid the Middle East. They go after the Byzantines, Muslims, fledgling European navies. Everybody hates these Muslims. The Muslim pirates. 75% Muslim, and the other 25% could be from anywhere. We call them Muslim pirates because it's just easy to remember. We've got Magyars over in the east. Remember the Huns? Same sort of thing. We've got an Asiatic tribe. They're raiding Eastern Europe. They're defeated by Otto the Great at the Battle of Lechfield, 955. They settle in a place called Hungary, because Hungarians, what language they speak? Nope, not Hungarian. They speak Magyar. It's their descendants. So they settle down over there in Hungary. So the Muslim problem is pretty much a Mediterranean problem, though they can strike deep into Europe if they need to. Magyars in the east, kind of localized, settling down. But these guys, even worse. We got the Vikings. Oh, where do these guys come from? First of all, they come from Scandinavia. And the reason they were launching raids out of Scandinavia, remember the 3-field system? It works. Population increases, and there's not a lot of flat land in Norway, Sweden, Denmark. So they start raiding outward, and they are awesome sailors. They end up all over the place. Magyars are localized. Muslims are kind of a Mediterranean problem. Vikings are all over the place. They go punching deep into what will be Russia one day. They raiding over Great Britain, France, ready for this? Spain. circle around Spain, and they go right into the Mediterranean. Vikings down in the Mediterranean. They discover Iceland. After Iceland comes Greenland. Keep going. What else is out there? After Greenland, in our year 1000, they end up landing in North America. That's right. The Vikings, first Europeans, came to America 400 years before Columbus even thought about it. Look at this. Look, they look like they're friends with the Native Americans here. Now, we're not sure who started the fight between the ancestors, the Algonquins, and of course the Vikings, but these are Vikings, so kind of draw your own conclusion there. They tried to establish colonies in North America. They refer to it as Vinland because you can grow grapes and vines there. Nova Scotia and all that looks warm compared to Norway, I guess. They couldn't establish the colonies. They couldn't stick because it's just too far away. I mean, it's just way out there. They finally reached as far as they could go. I've had some students ask, didn't disease spread wildly through the Native American population? I would think so, but we just don't have any records. I know, 1492, it'll just smallpox will rip right through the Native American population down the Caribbean. Don't have any evidence or records of that up in the northeast quadrant of North America, but, I'm sure it happened. Maybe the Vikings just weren't there long enough. Maybe also the population's not as dense, so they might have been spread out and spared that somewhat. Don't worry, Europeans are coming back. Now, the Vikings reach further and further out, and the further out you go, the harder it is to come back. If you're in Scandinavia, you raid Britain, you can come back. You raid the Netherlands, you can come back. You raid Germany, come back. You raid France, it's starting to get a little bit harder. How about those guys who went to Spain? All right, attack something in Spain, you want to turn around? How about the guys who went into the Mediterranean? It's not easy to turn around and come home again in one season. Getting harder and harder to come back because you're just too far away. And some of these countries start making deals with the Vikings. In 912, a Viking chieftain named Rollo, that name look familiar there, Cleveland Brown show fans? Yep, same name. He's given land in northern France, and it's called Normandy. That sound familiar? Bands of Brothers fans, right? Saving Private Ryan, Normandy. And here's the deal. This Viking chieftain named Rollo is given land in northern France and becomes the vassal to the king of France. Remember, feudalism. So, first generation, Vikings and Normans. Second generation, more Norman than Viking. Third generation, they're pretty much Normans. And they're going to remain Normans until 1066 when the king of Normandy, William the Conqueror, Duke of Normandy, William the Conqueror jumps across and conquers England. So Vikings have created their own nations, and now they're attacking other countries. William the Conqueror invades and conquers England. Battle of Hastings, 1066. Now this leads to an interesting question. If William the Conqueror, Duke of Normandy, is the vassal to the King of France, and he has conquered England, and therefore is the King of England, is the King of England now the vassal of the King of France? Yeah, France seems to think so. England's not going for it. Welcome to 800 years of England versus France. Some people say it still goes on in the World Cup. These Normans, you know about the three-field system. The Normans are doing great. Population's increasing. Do something with those extra Normans. Some go to England. Some decide to go elsewhere. They're going to go all the way to Sicily, in the middle of the Mediterranean. In 1068, they take over Sicily. 2 years after conquering England, more Normans have taken over Sicily in the central Mediterranean. They throw out the Muslims. They're fighting with Byzantines. These guys get around to even show up for the Crusades. They're in Europe, touch North America, Sicily, kind of touch, technically it was Asia and the Middle East. Normans get around. Nobody likes the Normans. They don't care. Headed for the Crusades. Battle of Manzikirk, 1071. Write that down. All right, here's how the Crusades kick off. First of all, here's Normandy. There's England they conquered. Look at this. Normans in Sicily. Grab southern Italy and take a bite out of Antioch. Well, Normans making enemies, they don't care. Now, the First Crusade began when the Turks from Central Asia converted to Islam and began moving into the Middle East. Of course, the Arabs and Persians are already here. What are you going to do with these guys? They're fellow Muslims, right? You already live here. So here's the idea. Turn them loose on somebody else. They direct the Turks here towards Anatolia. The Greeks live out on the edge. They claim this, but they don't really live there. So the interior of Anatolia is wide open and Turks go there. Of course, the Byzantines claim it, and there's going to be a fight over this. And a battle of Manzikert in 1071 out this way. Unfortunately, the Byzantines lose, and suddenly the Seljuk Turks have punched a huge hole into the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantines need help. Who are we getting help from? Now you got the Fatimid Egyptians down this way, but they're not going to help out the Byzantines. They're allied with the Turks. There's no help coming from the Muslim world. There's really no one else to turn except to the West. And we know that the Byzantines and the Christian West don't get along too well. But when your house is on fire, do you care who shows up in the fire department? Just as long as the fire department shows up. And that's what's going to happen. We are headed for the Crusades. Have a great day.